Just.
I saw a hand over here.
Oh, yeah, it's our director is suggesting if we could.
Oh, yeah, close in a little bit, then.
That's perfect.
For the cameras, for the cameras.
The devil may be in the details, and for a head of state, part of the argument for the monarchy is the monarch occupies a space that no politician can aspire to. That by the time a politician gets to be a president, that person is carrying a lot of baggage and maybe a lot of divisiveness along the way. And that's how close the American election is right now. Do you have in mind some kind of a mechanism for this new head of state in a republic to get to that position? How does that person become the head of state?
All right, I'm going to get into some abstract, creative aspects of this debate that generally don't get the light of day. For one thing, the crown and the monarchy are not synonymous. The crown is the Canadian state. There are two queens in Canada. There's the queen, the person, and the queen, the state. When you go to court, when you defend yourself against the government, or if you take the government to court, it's Joe Blow versus the queen. It's not the queen, the person. It's the queen, the state. So the crown will survive ending the link to the monarchy. It's just a name. And we often hear, as Neil has mentioned several times, he believes that he wants Canada to keep its ties to the crown. So do I. The crown is the state. What we need to do is define what is the embodiment of the state. I don't believe it should be a person. So as far as the function goes, the distance between the political aspect, when you talk about the Queen in Canada, you're talking about the Governor General. The Queen herself plays no role in Canada other than to come here and plant trees. Even Adrienne Clarkson herself wrote in her memoirs that in her 2 terms as Governor General, she not once had a constitutional discussion with the Queen. It was always about the pattern in the china or the day, and whether it's sunny or whatever. It's all small talk. The Queen does not involve herself in Canadian affairs. That was relegated in 1947 with the letters patent to the Governor General. So everything that you ask about the nonpartisanship and the function of the monarchy, directed at the Governor General. Ask yourself, right now, is the Governor General representing Canadian democracy properly? And I would say no, because since the letters patent, royal prerogative has evolved to the office of the Prime Minister. Not since the 1920s, since the King-Byng affair, has any Canadian Governor General defied the wishes of a Prime Minister. We have a rubber stamp, head of state. The Queen does nothing except come here at her invitation. The Governor General does nothing except do what the Prime Minister does or asks. The last time any Governor General defied a Prime Minister was when, I believe it was Schreiber, made Joe Clark sit outside his office for 10 minutes while he made a decision. That was it. That's our constitutional referee in action. That's nothing. When we reform the office of head of state, I would like to see a democratization process. There's already been a parliamentary committee on this in 2005, an all-party parliamentary committee that unanimously agreed that the selection process of the Governor General should be addressed, as well as the role and responsibilities. Nothing happened because the Martin government fell shortly after that, and the recommendations were not acted upon. The will is there. I go to leadership conventions of all the parties. I speak to MPs, cabinet ministers, several former prime ministers, and I can categorically tell you that the majority of those people agree that it's time for a national debate on this. So that's a fact. So when it happens, it's up to Canadians. It's not a matter of if, it's when.
Well, I'm gratified, deeply gratified, to think that the Governor General and the Queen are not having constitutional discussions. It seems to me that that would be highly inappropriate. that we're dealing with a ceremonial head of state. I agree with Tom. I'd like to see a greater refereeing power in the office of Governor General. But I think it's really unfortunate to diminish the role that the Governor General does play as head of state. I was fortunate enough to...
Mistake number one. He's not the head of state.
Okay. As the representative of the head of state, thanks. I was fortunate enough to be present at John Ralston Saul's last vice-regal speech at the Sharon Temple when he talked about many of the ideas that I've talked about tonight and how democracy was evolved in this country. And he talked about some of the things that he and his wife, Adrienne Clarkson, had done. And one of the things they had reintroduced was the idea of the levy, this, that the Governor General would hold these town halls across the country and give a direct voice to the people that they were speaking to. You know, we've seen time and time again a leadership role in the person that holds this office. And the idea that we should suddenly create a new level of Canadian government with an elected president who is going to hold some kind of undefined role as the country strips itself of its historical trappings and evolves into some new country with a prime minister and a parliamentary tradition and an undefined president or some figure thereof, if not a person, a moose, I don't know, that we're going to have a fundamentally different country if we're suddenly electing someone that is going to have a great deal of power. How does that person fit in with the parliamentary democracy that we've evolved? Canada's greatness really is that it is a paradox. It doesn't always make sense, but it works. It works beautifully. It works as well as any other democracy on the planet. And when you start kind of messing around in a sort of scientific experiment because it's time to throw away these ancient trappings and get modern, we just don't know what kind of Frankenstein's monster could be created with this newly elected President of Canada.
Tap that there. I think we got a response from both. More questions? Are there more? There's one over here. Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you both and to say that you've really clarified some of the ideas I had on this. I feel as if I have been a growing Republican over the years. I was born in England. I was taken to see the Queen open Parliament. I watched the coronation. I certainly, in the generations of my family, I was socialized into a deep love of the monarchy. But as I grew up and became an anthropologist and looked at other ways of people ruling their countries and thought about other ways of power, I see the monarchy as two things you haven't mentioned are really power and land. In England, I think that the monarchy has really held back economic development in the last 100 years. Prince Charles owns 2/3 of the whole Duchy of Cornwall. The royal family could have done a great deal more in the last 60 years to foster economic development in England. They have not done so because they've been busy hanging on to their lands and their money. So that's one reason. I think that to not acknowledge the fact that monarchy is the basis, as Monty Python said, of a system of government that is part of a sort of a land-owning structure and an exercise of power. What, in a sense, both of you have been doing all evening is talking about the superficialities of that particular exercise and never really getting over the fact that Canada's crown land was originally, of course, vested in the crown. I've lived in the United States for various periods of time teaching at universities, so I have lived in the belly of the beast. There is a certain freedom in which people don't feel that they have to pretend that they mind having someone from another country as head of state. And I think that's increasingly what I am minding. Also, since I did my thesis research in West Africa, I did a lot on the history of colonization. I do believe that we're into a constant forelock tugging exercise in Canada, especially reached its apogee with the William and Kate visit last year, or earlier this year, that, you know, and now it's getting into a melange with Hollywood stardom and, you know, cavorting in Las Vegas bedrooms and so on. That there's a sort of a now popular entertainment aspect to the monarchy, which is also muting the fact that we have a system of government which is connected to an outmoded other system of government. And I don't see that the next 100 years bodes well for Canada. I also don't see that the Queen was the only bulwark against American imperialism. I think it's up to every individual Canadian to be part of that bulwark, not...
With respect, I didn't say the Queen was the only
You
bulwark.
said, no, but you said she was...
I would have mentioned the beaver, but we only had so much time. I got the moose in briefly.
No, I'll just finish up by saying, of course I found it immensely stimulating, but I think that it's very unfortunate the way Quebecers are seen as being somehow not fitting our model right, when in fact it's our model that's wrong, that we should have a model in which every Canadian citizen feels that they are part of a country which stands on its own 2 feet. I mean, I don't know how many people know that French citizens in Canada the French government pays for them to go to French private schools in Canada. The French government pays a lot of money for the promulgation of the French language in Canada. There is also, in French-speaking universities in Canada, there's a lot of use of textbooks that are printed in Paris. There's the same kind of colonization of the French-Canadian mentality as there is of the English-Canadian mentality. And therefore, the only solution is...
I don't think you will. I think I'm watching the clock here. I think there's one important thing we need to do here tonight. Debates need winners. And I'm going to ask you to think for a moment, and I'm going to ask you to, by your applause, who feels they've been convinced by Tom Freda's argument that we need to retire the monument in Canada? By applause, please. And who's been convinced by Neil Ross's eloquent arguments that we're doing just fine with the monarchy as we have it? Applause, please. Well, I'm going to use my absolute authority to declare it's a tie.
Not so off from real polls. Polls show that it's like 47, 49, 48. Goes back and forth. It depends on the year, what's going on, whether there are any royal scandals or whatever. It goes back and forth. So I think it's reassuring that now there's a lot of really good questions coming out about the monarchy. When I first started this 15, 20 years ago, there were so many misconceptions. Canadians are getting a lot more educated about this, and I think there's more to come.
I just want to say, it occurred to me as I was listening, you could hear a pin drop in these guys. We were engaged in this argument. This is an important Canadian discussion, and you know, we had 2 proud Canadians talking here, totally different sides of the argument, but their pride in this country came through.
And we're not shooting each other either.
Yeah, those are my notes. And if I can just put another hat on briefly, I'd like to thank Tom and Chris so much for coming out. This really is one of the most exciting evenings we've ever had here, right? And so if we can, and if we were really organized, we'd have books. But we do have books for both of you. On the history of the Junction, if that's something that holds any interest. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. The first Thursday of December is our Christmas social. And Vandra has talked about how we might want to bring out